We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy.
The crisis in a Taliban-ruled Afghanistan challenges world leaders as they convene for their annual meeting at the United Nations. Hello and welcome to a special edition of Inside America with me, Ghida Fakhry, from United Nations headquarters in New York. As the UN's 76th session gets underway, heads of state and government renewed their commitments to taking collective action on climate change, the pandemic, and other challenges facing the UN and the multilateral system. But one issue that is dominating discussions here at the UN this week is the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Afghanistan and the regional threat to stability following the Taliban takeover last month. The Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, spoke recently about the need to engage with the Taliban.
We need to engage. We don't know how things will develop, but we know that if we don't engage, they will probably go in the wrong direction.
So will the UN recognize the Taliban interim government in Kabul, or will regional players like Pakistan have to take the lead? I sat down with Shah Mahmood Qureshi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. Foreign Minister Qureshi, thanks very much for speaking with us. Pakistan says it stands to lose the most if the situation in nearby Afghanistan is not brought under control. Just how worried is Pakistan that the Taliban in Afghanistan may not be able to control the situation in the entire country, that it won't be able to stabilize the situation? The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, said, quote, "It could go to chaos, the biggest humanitarian crisis, a huge refugee crisis." How concerned are you?
Well, obviously we are concerned. If things go wrong, there will be an influx, there will be a mass exodus, and we are saturated. We have over 3 million Afghan refugees that we are hosting for the last 4 decades. Frankly, we do not have the capacity to absorb any more. So that is a concern. Pakistan, very few realize, has been a victim. We've lost 80,000, we've had 80,000 casualties. Economic loss has been over $150 billion. So I'm not saying that things were good before the Taliban came in. We were being constantly attacked from Afghan soil. There were the TTP and other organizations with the nexus of NDS and RAW were targeting Pakistan.
But today, how confident are you that the authorities in Kabul, the Taliban, can stabilize the situation, especially along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border?
Well, if you look at things as they stand post 15th of August, it seems that the law and order situation is under control at the moment. But let's see, it's too early to make a value judgment. But what we are hoping is that they will live up to their promise. What is their promise? They're promising that we will not allow Afghan soil to be used against any country, and that includes Pakistan. So let's see if they live up to that.
The West and the US tend to look at Afghanistan through the prism of Kabul, but Kabul isn't Afghanistan. Is that a misjudgment in your opinion?
I think yes. If the Americans had understood the Afghan culture better, their traditions, their rivaj, as they call it, perhaps they would have looked for Afghan solutions to Afghan problems. Obviously, Kabul has always been different. Even in the 70s, when the Shah was the ruler there, Kabul was somewhat different. But life in the rural areas, the practices were different. Even under 20 years of, Ashraf Ghani and Karzai government, they ruled for almost 20 years over there. Life in rural areas more or less remained the same. Yes, there was a change in urban centers like Kabul. But by and large, the rural life was as it was.
But is it another misjudgment to look at the situation as if the rural areas didn't suffer such a huge humanitarian crisis, which didn't happen overnight? A majority of the population has been food insecure and has been that way for years. And now you've got that issue compounded with the fact that Afghanistan is facing essentially a new form of sanctions with the freezings of the assets, the central bank assets by the US, by the World Bank, by the IMF. Is that something that could potentially make a bad situation even worse?
Absolutely. If you freeze, now look at the dichotomy. On one hand, you are raising funds, collecting people in Geneva and getting fresh pledges, to avert a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. And on the other hand, that the money that's available, and can be used for, Afghan people, for food and medicine and whatever is required over there, has been frozen. It doesn't make sense. I think they should revisit that policy and it'll be counterproductive.
Should they revisit the policy of keeping some of the key members of the Taliban on the sanctions list? They're on the United Nations sanctions list.
Yes, they are.
Should they be delisted?
The question is, did you make a promise to them when you were having negotiations in Doha? Were they given an understanding that they will be taken off the list? And if they were, then they have expectations.
Your Prime Minister said just a few days ago that the best way forward to establish peace and stability in Afghanistan is to incentivize the Taliban, to incentivize them on issues like women's rights and the establishment of an inclusive government. Just how do you incentivize the Taliban? How much leverage does Pakistan have over the Taliban? Because, quite frankly, some people see it the other way as well, that they have quite a bit of leverage over you.
Well, see, they're independent-minded people. We can advise. We can't dictate. What we have been telling them is that they should take steps that give them acceptability. Inclusivity will stabilize things over there. Afghanistan is a country where different ethnic groups live. Pashtun is one ethnic group. They're Tajiks, they're Hazaras, they're Uzbeks. So if they give them a share, a sense of participation, I think they will stabilize things. And what are we talking about?
But you didn't answer the question, though. How much leverage do you have over them?
Well, our leverage is, I would say, it's not unlimited. It is not unlimited.
But is it significant?
I don't know how do you quantify that. I can't quantify it. They will do what they'll do, and we will tell them what we think is in their interest.
Because, as you know, the United States consistently accuses you of harboring terrorists, of giving them shelter. At the International Donor Conference on Afghanistan just a few days ago, your counterpart, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, urged Pakistan to, quote, get in line with the rest of the world and hold the Taliban government to its promises. It was more of an intimation, a warning, than it was an urging, wasn't it? The Americans say that Pakistan is hedging its bets.
How are we out of line?
They say you're hedging your bets.
No. How are we out of line to begin with? Our interests converge in Afghanistan. The Americans wanted peace, so do we. They want a stable Afghanistan, so do we. They want the space for a terrorist organization, ITOs, reduced, so do we. So where are we out of line? They wanted negotiations, we facilitated. They wanted help in evacuation, we helped. Where are we out of line? How are we not in sync with the international opinion? We are very much in line with the international opinion.
But what are your strategic calculations today? Because Pakistan has said that it wants to be more pragmatic towards Afghanistan's new leaders. 20 years ago, when the US invaded Afghanistan, Pakistan supported the US in its so-called war on terror. You yourself have said that you have paid quite heavily. The Prime Minister has said as well, quote, the Pakistani government was attacked by 50 militant groups over the years.
Yeah.
Do you still support this so-called war on terror? Where does Pakistan stand today?
Well, Pakistan has been an ally of the coalition for peace. Pakistan has been an ally in the war against terror. Pakistan was not responsible for 9/11. We had a choice, and we sided with the rest of the world. We sided with the United States and others, because what happened in New York was horrific. We condemned it, and we chose to side, and we paid a price.
Do you regret siding
No,
with the US?
no.
Because of the price you had to pay?
Well, the price was very heavy, but we do not regret fighting elements that have been harsh on our people. They have carried out terrorist activities in Pakistan. Many of our people have suffered. Look at the losses we've had. Our children were attacked. Don't forget the attack on the Army Public School in Peshawar, and innocent people were lost and killed in Pakistan.
Thousands of innocent lives were lost. The Foreign Minister. The Prime Minister said 480 US drone strikes took place, but this sounds like a very conservative estimate, doesn't it? You have said repeatedly, we were doubted, we were questioned, there was the loss of innocent lives. Let me ask you today, do you regret not taking a more forceful stance against these drone attacks that have left so many civilians dead?
Well, drones, there was a collateral damage linked to the drones. And you saw the latest, the Americans had to apologize on the latest drone attack.
But is that how you would call it, collateral damage? Civilian deaths by the thousands.
There was lots of damage. I said, yes, innocent people got killed. Yes, there were bad guys taken out. At the same time, a lot of innocent people died. But you don't attack an ally. Pakistan was an ally, and I think at times we were not taken into confidence when those attacks were carried out.
And again, killings from the air, which have gone on for years by a foreign power, by an ally, as you say, in violation of your own sovereignty, with complete impunity. But should you as well demand apologies, compensation for the victims, above all, a stop to these attacks? Because we've been hearing this buzz phrase in Washington, D.C. since US troops have left Afghanistan, that there will be, quote, over-the-horizon measures that will continue. And over-the-horizon measures must involve some kind of launch of airstrikes either from Pakistan or from Iran.
Well, Pakistan, under this leadership, I don't think Prime Minister Imran Khan would permit that.
Have you given any authorization, will you give any authorization either for your territory to be used to launch airstrikes into Afghanistan or for your airspace to be used?
Our territory will not be used.
It hasn't been and won't be.
It will not be used, I said.
And the airspace? Will you allow the overflight of US drones attacking targets within Afghanistan?
Well, we will have to see what the conditions are. We'll have to see what the situation is. But we would prefer that these strikes, have they been helpful? We have to see to what extent. Or have they added to the anger in the people, the determination to fight on, It
They
also.
must have made a lot of Pakistanis very angry.
Oh yes.
Do you think that
Oh, yes.
Washington should apologize, compensate the victims? Or is that wishful thinking?
Well, I would say they should stop doing what hasn't worked very successfully.
But are you able to tell the Americans that they should stop?
Yes, they should.
Have you told them that they should?
Well, when I get an opportunity, meeting the Secretary of State, I will share my views with him.
It was very surprising, Foreign Minister, to hear in an interview the Prime Minister say that he did not speak with President Biden since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. Has he spoken to him since? Have you spoken with your American counterpart?
Oh, yes, I have. I've had 3 conversations over the telephone with him, and I intend to see him here in New York.
Are you surprised that the President did not speak to the Prime Minister?
Well, they expect a lot from Pakistan. Pakistan has done a lot, and engaging with a friend is always useful.
Engaging with a friend. Let me ask you about engaging with the Taliban, recognizing the Taliban. When the Taliban were in power between 1996 and 2001, Pakistan was one of just 3 countries to recognize them. It was Pakistan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Today, how close is Pakistan to recognizing the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan?
We are looking at the situation. We haven't taken a decision yet. We've noted the announcement of the new interim government. We are deliberating upon the situation, and in due course, we'll take a decision.
What will it take, though? Are you waiting for Moscow and Beijing to lead the way, perhaps?
No, we are seeing how they conduct themselves. Do they live up to what they've said?
How they conduct themselves, but there is a fait accompli. They have won the war. I don't think there's any government in the world that so recognizes the Ashraf Ghani government. Should they be recognized sooner or later? And haven't you, if not de facto, recognized them de jure?
Well, the
bestowed
world-
recognition on them by keeping your
No,
embassy
but-
open in Kabul?
The world has de facto recognized them. When you were signing a peace agreement with them in Doha, what was that? What was that? Wasn't that a de facto recognition? When Secretary Pompeo signed the peace agreement with Mullah Brother, what was that?
But are you saying that you have recognized them? Have you officially recognized them,
No,
as far
we
as you're
haven't.
concerned?
We
Because
haven't.
they
We
are
haven't.
your
We haven't
they are
officially-
your official interlocutors.
We haven't officially recognized them, but as immediate neighbors, we have to deal with them. There are issues that we have to deal on a daily basis. For example, trade going into Afghanistan through Pakistan. For example, border crossings, so on and so forth. These are things, for example, like evacuation. The world wanted Pakistan to help them in evacuating foreign nationals. Now, how could we have done that without engaging with them?
And you kept your embassy open. So did the Russians and the Chinese. And I believe the Iranians as well. Does that mean some kind of recognition, yes or no? I mean, it sounds like it's almost absurd to ask the question because you are still there. You haven't severed relations.
Our embassy remains open to facilitate thousands of Afghans who travel to Pakistan, on a daily basis. There were about 20 to 25,000 daily crossings, from Pakistan to Afghanistan. So how do you manage that? How do you manage that without an embassy? Some countries had the luxury of getting up and leaving. We don't have that luxury. We have to live there. We coexist. Geography has tied us together.
Do you think there's any point in keeping the Taliban government out of the United Nations? Would it be more amenable to pressure, diplomatic pressure, if it were given a place at the table at the United Nations? Because the current policy, some might suggest, could only harden the already hardline elements within the Taliban. And if reports are to be trusted, there is quite a bit of internal tensions between the different elements within the group.
You see, pressure threats, intimidation hasn't worked on the Taliban. Now, if it hasn't, then I think there has to be a new approach. There could be innovative ways of engaging with them, incentivizing, positive behavior. This is what we're suggesting.
Are you aware of the internal tensions?
Let's not forget that now their role is changing. Their role is changing from a fighting force to a leadership that has to provide governance. Expectations change, demands change, and they have to fall in line with that. They also realize that they would need international help and assistance. And you see their behavior is somewhat different from the past.
Has Pakistan been under any kind of pressure from the US not to recognize the Taliban?
Well, we will take our own decision. We will see what is in Pakistan's interest.
How would you describe your relationship today with the United States? Because listening to the Prime Minister, he says that the relationship over the years has become terrible, in his words, and has been quite disastrous for Pakistan. He says Pakistan has been treated like a hired gun because of the billions of dollars in aid that Islamabad receives from Washington. What's the relationship like today?
Well, it's been cyclical. We've had ups and downs. The fact that Pakistan, being an important country in the region, bordering Afghanistan, and you've spent 20 years there, you have interests in peace and stability there, and you're not, you can't find the time to talk to the elected Prime Minister of the country, is not good news.
And of course, over the last few years during the Trump administration, the US has gotten closer to your arch enemy, India. Has that pushed you more towards the east, towards Beijing, as your primary strategic partner moving forward? Has it changed the dynamics?
We've had a strategic relationship with them for decades. This shift is a recent shift, but our relations go far back with Beijing. They're not India-centric. We have an independent relationship with the Chinese,
sure,
and they've stood by us.
But are you compelled today to decide which camp you might be in?
We don't
the
want
Chinese
to be,
or the American?
How
long can you afford to keep walking a tightrope?
We do not want to be in any camp, but we value our relationship with China. They've stood with us when the West turned away. They kept their focus. They kept investing in Pakistan. The economic corridor, we think, is a very important project. It's a game changer. I think it will give us economic integration, and it's important for us.
All right. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
While cameras may slowly be turning away from Afghanistan, it remains a major diplomatic headache for many of the powers represented here at the United Nations. Many seem unsure of what position to take. 5 months before the Taliban takeover, 43% of Afghanistan's GDP came from foreign assistance. Overnight, that budgetary support has virtually stopped, drying up liquidity and pushing the country towards a total economic collapse and an epic humanitarian crisis with acute food insecurity throughout the country. The US, which is calling the shots, bears responsibility for what may still unfold. After the withdrawal of the Soviet Union, Washington forgot Afghanistan. Today, it may well be pushing it towards an abyss. Central to what could happen is the question of recognition of the new Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, and here, all are proceeding cautiously. Only for some, like China, Russia, or Pakistan, critical states for Afghanistan's future, their position can be qualified as diplomatic ambiguity. But is it truly ambiguous? They all maintain their embassies and ambassadors in Kabul, having de facto, if not de jure, recognized the new authorities in Kabul. It is almost paradoxical for a state to maintain its ambassador in a foreign capital and claim it hasn't recognized that government. So in short, While the question of diplomatic recognition of the new Taliban government in Kabul may not be settled anytime soon, countries that have not withdrawn their ambassadors from Kabul after the Taliban takeover and put the key of their embassy under the doormat, such as the US did, have in effect accepted the Taliban as the new representative government of Afghanistan. They may no longer be hedging their positions, but are simply trying to hide their cards awkwardly, waiting for the right time to publicize a decision that's already been made. That's all from me, Ghida Fakhry, at the United Nations. From the entire team, thanks for watching.